All right, I think I'm all wired up. Have everything running. So last week I said I was interrupting the normally scheduled Bible class for a special presentation, and the presentation is on voting in political elections, and this was motivated by a video that the WCF had released several weeks ago. And what I was doing, I just played about the first 7 minutes. It was like a 20-minute long video. I heard it's supposed to be like it was a 3-hour long session. 4 hours, yeah. Do you know if they have any plans on releasing the rest? Okay. Anyway, I didn't play the whole 20-minute video. It was interesting. What I did was share the first 7 minutes, and then I wanted to look at the reasoning, the arguments that were presented in that. There was a roundtable discussion of 5 young people, and by young I mean probably 20s and 30s. Yeah. Now I want to say in advance, because some people might be concerned that we're criticizing other brothers and sisters. Among the 5, there was 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and I want to make it clear, I have no hostility toward any of the individuals, especially the 3 sisters. They're the ones who actually kind of took a different viewpoint as opposed to our traditional historic stance with regards to voting and political activity. I have no hostility toward the 3 sisters who were critiquing their position, and I don't have any desire to embarrass anybody. The purpose in playing these video clips, I'm going to play a few more this morning, is so that we can address their arguments, to hear them out, to listen to see what they have to say, rather than shut them down and say they're wrong. The scriptures say to try, not to believe every spirit, but to try the spirits. And I think that's what we're trying to do in that spirit of testing the spirits, pardon the pun. Also, I should point out that the individuals who participated in that roundtable discussion knew full well that the video was going to get public distribution, and I think it's only fair that we have an opportunity to publicly express our thoughts too, in addition to them publicly expressing their thoughts. I will try my best to be polite and fair in critiquing the positions that are presented, and I ask everyone here to do the same. So I also will pull up, what I have on the screen here, is what accompanied the email, which says WCF Williamsburg Christadelphian Foundation presents this roundtable discussion among a group of young believers to encourage greater understanding of the wide range of views currently held on the subject of voting and political participation. The viewpoints are wide, but the anchor of the discussion is Scripture. We encourage everyone to use the discussion to stimulate discussion and, above all, a deeper understanding of the subject. The video has generated a wide range of feedback. We are especially encouraged that it has been used as a starter for a number of ecclesial Bible classes on this topic, and I don't know if somebody's watched UCF, hello, or whether in fact there are many ecclesias who are talking about the video. So that's what we wanted to do. Let's see if I can pick up where we left off last week. Okay, so I had played a clip. I'm not going to replay the video, but this was essentially 2 sisters presenting their reasoning as to why they believe voting is proper for a Christian. Sister number 1 says, one of the ways that we can help people who are less fortunate than us and positively affect people in our communities is by voting. And sister number 2 says, I think we also have an obligation to the people around us outside of our church, that it's our duty to love them and support them, and that some of the ways that we can do that are through voting. And the scriptural basis, they didn't, neither of them really provided a particular quote or a verse, but it was said generally, and this is their words, or one of the sisters' words, I can see the importance that God places on helping those around us throughout the entire Old Testament, the way the prophets talk to the nation of Israel, the law of Moses, and to today in our communities, one of the ways we can do that is by voting. So that was the argument. I presented that to everyone last week. I asked for feedback. I was said specifically I wanted feedback on this particular argument. What happened, for the most part, was it was more like they're wrong because they're forgetting that we're conscientious objectors of war. And although that's all true, what I wanted to do is actually address this specific argument, which was, is one of the ways we can help people who are less fortunate and affect people in our community is through voting. And I asked, is that a true statement? And I had to play the devil's advocate. I think Rob, Kathy, your husband, was really the only one who said, yeah, it's in theory, it's true. So that's what I was trying to get at, is a confirmation that, this reasoning, or I should say this particular explanation, is a valid one. In theory, it is possible to affect or help those less fortunate through voting. Now, there are things that are overlooked in that true statement, which is what we want to address. What I want to do is move on to the third sister, because she essentially reiterated, and I think she actually has a little bit stronger argument on this particular point. So what I'm going to do is play this clip, and then we'll talk about.
I am a physician, and I am training to be a general surgeon. And the way that I see issues related to policy and healthcare show up is when you're seeing people, teenagers that are victims of gun violence, and you're wondering if there more that you can do in the community, figuring out what factors are involved in this person ending up here. And a lot of that is policy, and one of the surefire ways to change policy is to vote.
Okay, so she's a physician. She's working in the inner city, and she's seeing. I think this is the quotation here from Sister number 3, if you need to have it in front of you. She sees a lot of teenagers come into the ER or her hospital who are victims of gun violence. So she figures that if she votes a particular way, let's say for instance a party has a platform that is going to make it more difficult to acquire, let's say, assault rifles, or have background checks, make that a little bit more tighter as far as the procedure. She figures if she votes for that particular party, and that party, let's say, is in the White House and also has majority in both parts of the Congress, that there could be, in fact, meaningful change with respect to gun policy, and hopefully there will be a reduction of gun violence and fewer young people being wheeled into the emergency room with gunshot wounds. Is that a valid point that she is making, that she can help reduce gun violence by voting? Is that a true statement? Potentially. Yeah, if all the cards line up, you have, in fact, a majority of a particular party who's in office, yes, you could theoretically change gun policy and hopefully reduce the number of gun shootings. It's a valid point. Now, the problem is, what is she overlooking? Okay, and that's very important. So I'm trying to be fair to them. They present valid points, but I think they're overlooking a lot. Sure, go ahead.
I don't want to jump the gun. Are you already, no pun intended there. Are you planning on going to Jeremiah 29 at any time, or
Am I going to what?
Jeremiah 29?
No, I'm not going to Jeremiah.
Okay, so For what she's saying there, the message from Jeremiah says, build houses, make yourselves at home, put gardens and eat what grows in that country. Put in gardens and eat what grows in that country, marry and have children, encourage children and marry and have children so that you will thrive in that country and not waste away. Make yourselves at home there, work for the country's welfare, pray for Babylon's well-being. If things go well for Babylon, things will go well for you. So that's on the side of wishing the best for the country that you live in, making things as good as you can in that country so that things go well for you as well. To pray for
So are you arguing in support of her as far as she's trying to make things better as a stranger and pilgrim in the land in which she's dwelling?
Right.
That she's trying to make things better for that land by having fewer young people shot.
Lots of ways you can make things better. Maybe voting is not the best way. There are probably much better ways to do that.
But as far as this particular point, it's not an invalid point. We'll look into what other complications come along with this position. But I just want to confirm her point is accurate as it stands. There's a lot missing though, okay? Which is what we're going to get into. Now, last week, is Randy here? Yes, you are. Do you remember last week after class you came to me and you told me what I was looking for in class? You've totally forgotten, or? Okay, if you could share what's wrong with this particular argument as far as voting because you agree with one particular policy item that they're running on.
I said a politician has views on a lot of policies, and it's this sister in favor of all his positions on all the other policies.
Okay, so she's picking one out that she favors, but she's not addressing all the other policies that, a party has a platform. They usually publish, at least here in the US, I don't know elsewhere, but they have a platform, and yes, they can run on a platform of reducing gun violence, but they could also be running on multiple other policies that they would like to put into place if they are elected.
I've kind of like a general context question. When we're looking into the scriptures and using examples, what times historically in the scriptures did believers have a chance to vote?
Well, you have to describe voting. There actually I know one particular instance in the New Testament, and we'll get into that. You could call it a referendum. It wasn't, where they went on a particular day and dropped their votes in a ballot, but there was a referendum one time in the New Testament, and surely didn't turn out well. You all say, oh, how did I overlook that one? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So Roger has, okay.
I wasn't part of last week's discussion, but I think an overriding principle that is the umbrella over all of this is that, these are policies of men, and you can't pick and choose, if you align yourself, with any sort of kingdom of this earth, you're going to get a whole lot of, like Randy said, you may cherry pick and find one
Right.
that you're in accordance with, and others that you're going to get along with that. But under the Lord, it was a theocracy, not a democracy, and all of his laws were just. They weren't convenient for the people, but they were just. And to me, if you're operating from that framework, it's pretty easy to see the course of action.
So essentially you get the good with the bad with our current system, because we don't have a theocracy and our laws are not enacted or proclaimed by God. Roger?
Yeah, just to follow up to remind people of history, or some who might not know the history of Israel, they did it. I guess their style of voting was the lottery, not their lottery today, but where people were chosen by a black or a white stone. I mean, it's sort of like voting on the Matthias to become the 12th apostle and things like that. They left it up to God for the answer. It wasn't a majority rule, because it came down to one bead being pulled out of the bag, so to speak, just to remind people of the history of Israel, of how they did things. It's not the way we do things.
Okay, so,
One last point.
Walter?
So just in general, as we go through this process and think about things, one of the most important principles that was taught to me early in life is that we look at God's word in its context to the audience to which it was addressed first and foremost. So we consider the Jeremiah passage. That instruction set was to God's people, specifically at that time, in specifically to the fact they were in captivity in Babylon. We have to be careful about trying to drag that forward and say, well, that applies to me today too. You need to see the other scriptural contexts that say that is so. So just keep that in mind as we try to figure out the pros and cons of these things.
Okay. So I'm going to move on, and this is going to be, I think, Jacob, you may be involved in this particular clip, if I'm remembering right.
So when you are vetting your candidates that you would be potentially voting for, and then, well, let's say they get in office, they end up doing both good things that you support and then bad things that you would not have supported. How do you weigh that in your own head?
No, it's all an exercise in trying to do the best you can. I think, like you're trying, sort of with any decision you make, we're trying to make the best decisions that we can with the information that we have at the time. And I think God would agree with.
Okay, so I'm going to put her words
So when you,
up on the screen here. It's all an exercise in trying to do the best you can. I think, like you're trying, sort of with any decision you make, we're trying to make the best decision that we can with the information that we have at the time, and I think God would agree with. On the face, it seems a reasonable position, but here's the question I would ask. This is in the context of having already made up your mind you're voting. And she's talking about making the best decision to who to vote for. I would say there is another decision, there's another option, that is not to vote, okay? And is that, in fact, perhaps a better decision than taking, or being, I don't call it required, but taking, the time to look at who's running and make their choice and hoping that you do the best you can. So I want to illustrate the problem with the arguments that these sisters have presented. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go through two exercises. So this is in response to this rationale that one of the ways to help our neighbors and those less fortunate than us is to vote for policies that will benefit for them. So with that rationale in mind, I want to present to you some policies, and I want to get your feedback on whether these policies would in fact benefit our neighbors and whether these policies would help those who are less fortunate than ourselves. So I've got 9 policy statements here, and I want you to just think about these and see, do you have any objection to these particular policies, okay? The state, number 1, the state shall make its primary duty to provide livelihood, that is employment for its citizens. Does anyone have any problem with that? Okay. 2, all citizens shall have equal rights and duties. Any problem with that? Seems good? Okay. 3, it must be the first duty of every citizen to perform physical or mental work. The activities of the individual must not clash with the general interest, but must proceed within the framework of the community and for the general good. In other words, what they do is for the general well-being of society, not just something for themselves. Jacob?
I was just thinking about that first statement. The state shall make its primary duty to provide a livelihood or employment for its citizens. I don't believe that is the state's responsibility, that it is not their responsibility to make certain that I have a job. It is my own responsibility to actually go find a job as long as it's benefiting society and therefore bringing about a better situation for both myself and those who I'm working with.
Okay, well, I respect your opinion. there's nothing wrong with it, but I would say there's nothing wrong with this either for a state to want to see full employment. I mean, we're trying to shoot for zero unemployment. So I think that's more the context, is to be able to have a healthy economy and provide jobs for people who want them, I guess is how I would define that. But I'm not dismissing your argument either. I see what you're saying.
I think the problem with the statement is the state shouldn't provide it. They should provide an environment where that is allowable.
Well, all this is like nitpicking. What I'm trying to, like, any gross objections like this is way, way overboard and simply, part of a communist manifesto.
Yeah. So these kind of statements can be found in all kinds of, documents like a communist. I bet you could pull some of these or similar things from Nazi documents. And not knowing the context here is really not fair for us. I'm not sure why you picked these particular, but you're headed
because I'm
towards a
keeping
point.
in the vein of the sisters who would vote for policies or choose a party based upon having policies that benefit those who are less fortunate. So I'm picking some policies that in fact would benefit poor.
So
I'm
these
trying
are
to keep
US
in line with
policies?
what they're.
It's a given that these are US policies or what?
Well, you're getting ahead of.
I thought so. Thank you.
Trying to find out is there anything unreasonable here that you have to hold your nose and say this stinks, this is totally unscriptural. That's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so I'm getting little picks, but overall I think they're not crazy policies for a state to have. Number 4, the extensive development of insurance of old age, okay, or for old age. We have it here, so I don't know, it seems like a reasonable thing. 5, the creation and maintenance of a healthy middle class, the utmost consideration shall be shown to all small traders in the placing of state and municipal orders. Let's be fair, so there's not big corporations getting all the money from the government. 6, the curricula of all educational establishments must be brought into line with the requirements of practical life. The education of gifted children of poor parents, whatever their class or occupation, shall be provided at the expense of the state. Not unreasonable. 7, ensure the nation's health standards are raised by protecting mothers and infants, by prohibiting child labor, by promoting physical strength through legislation providing for compulsory gymnastics and sports, and by the extensive support of clubs engaged in the physical training of youth. 8, freedom for all religious denominations in the state. And lastly, stands for positive Christianity but does not commit itself to any particular denomination. Would you be happy living in a particular country that has in place a party that has these as part of its platform?
Well, the first one sounds very Nazi anyway, but could you go back to the education slide, the one before? This is where I would bring up the argument that I am currently in education, of course, and it is being very strongly pushed to put my pronouns on every single email I send in and out. It is being very strongly pushed from the government what literature I should be almost selling my students in my classroom. So the government has a great deal of intervention in what I do.
Okay.
And I'm educating children. So if I agree with all those policies, then I am affecting thousands upon thousands of children every day.
Okay. So what I don't want to do is find or nitpick these policies. What I'm trying to do is find some policies that actually were on a platform of a political party at one point that don't sound crazy. That's all I'm trying to do here, okay? That's all I'm trying to do. These are 9 policies that have been on a political platform of a political party. That was actually put into power through voting, okay? I'm doing this because we have had the argument presented to us that I think we should vote because voting will benefit those less fortunate. So I'm picking up 9 policies that seem to fall in that type of umbrella, and I will explain at the end of this exercise, or actually at the end of the second exercise. So exercise number 2, we're going to have a vote here. We're going to go to the polls this morning, And some of you may remember this because I had this as part of an exhortation a couple years back. So what I want to do is I'm going to present to you 3 candidates, and I'm going to list some of their character traits, some of their history, and I want you to think hard because all of us are going to vote this morning on one of the 3 candidates. So candidate A associates with crooked politicians, consults with astrologers, has had 2 mistresses, smokes constantly, plays cards every chance he gets, drinks 8 to 10 alcoholic beverages a day. That's candidate number A. Candidate B has been kicked out of office twice, sleeps until noon, takes leisurely baths lasting for hours, used hard drugs in college, drinks a quart of whiskey every evening. Candidate B. Candidate C is a decorated war hero, a vegetarian. He does not smoke, drinks only an occasional beer, and is extremely kind to children and dogs. All right, so I want you to think very hard. I mean, we don't have any, music in the background with dun, dun, dun. Okay, well, thank you. So is that Jeopardy music? Okay. So who here would vote for candidate A based upon these qualifications or this? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. So you like what? You like his profile? Yeah, okay. This profile is looking more youthful. Anyway, candidate B. Any supporters for candidate B? Oh, okay. We got one, candidate B. And candidate C, anyone interested in having him in office? Okay, so I got a few. All right, so these are actual historic figures. Candidate A was Franklin D. Roosevelt. Candidate B was Winston Churchill. And candidate C was Adolf Hitler. Okay? Now, for those who don't know it, Hitler was appointed as German chancellor in 1933, receiving 11 million votes by the German people year before. And the point of this mock election is very often people don't have a clue who they are electing as their leader. And all more importantly, they don't have a clue what evils may come to pass after their newly elected leader is put into power. Even those with the most seemingly good character can actually, in fact, be deeply disturbed and immoral people. So remember those 9 policy items. They're actually, and I said this, they're part of a platform of a political party. Anyone want to guess what political party had those 9 items on their platform? The Nazi Party platform of 1920. Okay, so I'm going through this exercise to show the perils. This is just one problem, just one of many problems with voting, and voting just because you support a policy or 9 policies. You often don't know what you're getting into or supporting.
Was some of the deplorable stuff that the Nazis believed in, like in the paperwork in the 1920s too, or was that added?
Yeah, I didn't give you all the 14 other nasty stuff. Okay. I cherry picked the nice, good stuff. Okay, but that's the point. That's the problem. I think Brandy was trying to point out. If you're going to vote for somebody or a particular party, it comes with multiple, just policies. They're not going to be elected because they want to make sure that senior citizens are taken care of. They're running on other policies. That's something we need to remember when we go, or if you're going to argue that we should vote. You got to remember you're going to get the bad with the good. And I think, Jacob, that was the point you were trying to make in that clip. Go ahead.
Just looking back at the policies that you've cherry-picked, that is kind of what we get with the candidates today. They will cherry-pick what policies they want you to know about adamantly, and then the other policies they will keep underneath the rug until it comes out later on. And I think that's something that we need to be mindful of, especially in regards to, for the Nazis, that political party was especially a prevailing influence on the Germans because of the fact that they had been in such a low, as a society group itself, had been in such a low place, and so it really did appeal to them.
So you can actually go to the Holocaust Museum website and you can type in Nazi Party platform 1920, and you can read, you can see up there it says, was a 25-point program. And you'll see the nasty stuff that also accompanied this, these 9 good things. So these were 2 exercises I would have wanted to share with these sisters or make them aware of. Is there someone else? Yeah, okay.
I just want to start by saying I appreciate everything that you are doing and what you're presenting to us. I think it's very valid. But the idea of cherry picking and, you know, what you're trying to show, I'm just thinking of today's youth. Like, you could say the same argument about applying for a job or applying for a college or university. They're just going to show you the good stuff, right? Like, politicians are just going to show you the highlights of what they're going for, but they're not going to talk about the bad things. They're not going to talk about things that are what they don't want their candidate, their people to know. So I think it's just selling, right? They're selling themselves, just like colleges do, just like a job does. When you go on an interview, they don't say, oh yeah, we have this much unemployment. They don't tell you the bad stuff. Same with politicians. So I think it's a hard sell for today's youth by saying, oh, they're just cherry picking, because everything does that.
It's a hard sell. I don't follow the last point. It's a hard sell, because this is...
By telling young people not to vote because politicians are only showing you these things, that's like anything in life. That's like applying to colleges or getting a job. They're only going to sell you on the good stuff. They're promoting themselves. But yeah, you have to do your own research and digging to find out all the other truths. And I think when you're talking about today's young people...
So when you say today's young people, are we talking about Christadelphian young people or just young people in general?
Sadly, both.
Okay, well, I don't... Honestly, this is a discussion about the proper thing for a follower or brother or sister in Christ to do. If the entire world wants to vote for Hitler, then go ahead. Okay, I'm not complaining about them. I'm talking about the roundtable discussion, I presume, was what is the proper action for brethren of Christ in face of a political election. That's what the study's about. What is the proper response to followers of Jesus if the world wants to go and commit, wars or genocide? Yeah, it's not a good thing, but I'm concerned about the body of Christ and how we are witnessed. So that's what I'm focusing on. That's why I wanted to have you clarify the young people. Jesse?
Yeah, so the other thing is, what is a vote? And coming at it from the other way is, is it a sin? Do some people say it's a sin if you vote because somebody you voted for did a sin or something like that? And then the other question is the whole Christadelphian body now contaminated by that voter's sin? And this is where we all go with this. This is why we talk about it. But a vote is a suggestion to someone in the Electoral College who can still vote any way he wants to. And if you are on the losing side of the votes that suggest to that guy or person how to vote, then your vote is thrown out. So I don't see a direct connection that could lead to condemnation from something that's not even connected to the end result. So that's just the way I look at it.
Well, I would ask you to stick with the study, okay?
Okay.
You're getting
thank
a little
you for
bit
letting
ahead.
me say that.
But I would say, if you're saying, okay, if I voted for Hitler, but Hitler lost, then what's the big deal? Well, then the reverse is, I did vote for Hitler. Do I have any moral responsibility for what happened? I would say, for examples, I would say yes. We started, I don't know if you were here with the anti-Semitism class, we got into, were the Jews culpable, okay, for killing Jesus? And the scriptures can be used to say, yes, they were culpable. Now, Daniel, you asked about, are there any examples in scripture where there was voting going on? When Jesus was brought before the crowd and there was the option, choose Barabbas or choose Jesus, there was a referendum right there. He presented two choices and he presented it to the people. And the people chose Barabbas and wanted Jesus crucified. Now, you can fast forward. Do you think God was happy with that particular choice? Obviously, the answer is no. Was there anything that happened to the Jewish people as a result of that choice? Okay. Is there then culpability for choices that you make, public decisions, a referendum, voting for politicians? I would argue, and I've just simply scratched the surface, I've got more verses or passages where there is culpability for decisions that you make for what happens down the road. So whether Hitler makes it a power or not, to me, that's not the issue. If, in fact, he does, and even if, regardless, let's not even talk about Hitler. We can talk about George W. Bush, for example. In 2004, there was essentially an election on whether we would continue fighting in Iraq or not. If you voted for George, and he made it very clear throughout his candidacy for re-election, this is about whether we continue the war. Now, if you vote for a candidate who says, vote for me and I will continue the war, don't you think that there's some culpability on your part for the continuation of the war? When the man says, vote for me and I'll do this, and you vote, he does it, and can you just disconnect, wash your hands like Pilate, and say, I have absolutely no culpability in this? I just find that not being innocent as doves. We're supposed to be wise as serpents. So anyway, I'm sorry to go off on a rant here.
So I'm going to go back to a point that the sister made earlier about I'm looking out for the best interest of other people, less fortunate. And my argument would be that, well, and I'll say it in a more general sense, people tend to vote their self-interest, not the interest of others. And I mean, I can twist this around as well. I can say, for instance, in this election, there's a party that says, I'm going to make Social Security all tax-free. So if I were going to vote, I'd say, well, that's really in my self-interest, and you as a young person should do it too, because it honors your father and mother. And so we could go down these rabbit trails all day long and try to take certain verses out to say why this is a great idea. And so I think self-interest does come into a part of this.
So I've just presented one of many. I could give you 13 other reasons not to vote, and I will start doing this next week. I know this is going to be dragging on past the actual election period, but there are many, many, many valid reasons why not to vote. And I haven't even gotten to the primary one, and that is our own history, which we'll get into next week. We'll go back to 1864, and we're going to look at a particular document, and it's just going to be very difficult to argue against that as a Christadelphian. And that's really what I'm trying to study here, is what is the proper position for a Christadelphian to have in regards to national elections. So anyway, thank you for your attention.